What is this great affair, Count? Let us have it over, and then you can tell me about the dogs." Rischenheim looked round the room. There was nobody. The curtains were still. The king's left hand caressed his beardless chin. The right was hidden from his visitor by the small table that stood between them. "Sire, my cousin, the Count of Hentzau, has entrusted me with a message." Rudolf suddenly assumed a stern air. "I can hold no communication, directly or indirectly, with the Count of Hentzau," said he. "Pardon me, sire, pardon me. A document has come into the count's hands which is of vital importance to your Majesty." "The Count of Hentzau, my lord, has incurred my heaviest displeasure." "Sire, it is in the hopes of atoning for his offences that he has sent me here to day. There is a conspiracy against your Majesty's honor." "By whom, my lord?" asked Rudolf in cold and doubting tones. "By those who are very near your Majesty's person, and very high in your Majesty's love." "Name them." "Sire, I dare not. You would not believe me. But your Majesty will believe written evidence." "Show it me, and quickly. We may be interrupted." "Sire, I have a copy." "Oh, a copy, my lord," sneered Rudolf. "My cousin has the original, and will forward it at your Majesty's command. A copy of a letter of her Majesty's." "Of the Queen's?" "Yes, sire. It is addressed to " Rischenheim paused. "Well, my lord, to whom?" "To Mr. Rudolf Rassendyll." Now Rudolf played his part well. He did not feign indifference, but allowed his voice to tremble with emotion as he stretched out his hand and said in a hoarse whisper: "Give it to me. Give it to me." Rischenheim's eyes sparkled. His shot had told. The king's attention was his. The coats of the dogs were forgotten. Plainly he had stirred the suspicions and jealousy of the king. "My cousin," he continued, "conceives it his duty to lay the letter before your Majesty. He obtained it " "A curse on how he got it! Give it to me." Rischenheim unbuttoned his coat, then his waistcoat. The head of a revolver showed in a belt round his waist. He undid the flap of a pocket in the lining of his waistcoat, and he began to draw out a sheet of paper. But Rudolf, great as his powers of self control were, was but human. When he saw the paper, he leant forward, half rising from his chair. As a result, his face came beyond the shadow of the curtain, and the full morning light beat on it. As Rischenheim took the paper out, he looked up. He saw the face that glared so eagerly at him. His eyes met Rassendyll's. A sudden suspicion seized him, for the face, though the king's face in every feature, bore a stern resolution and witnessed a vigor that was not the king's. In that instant the truth, or a hint of it, flashed across his mind. He gave a half articulate cry. In one hand he crumpled up the paper, the other flew to his revolver. But he was too late. Rudolf's left hand encircled his hand and the paper in an iron grip. Rudolf's revolver was on his temple, and an arm was stretched out from behind the curtain, holding another barrel full before his eyes, while a dry voice said, "You'd better take it quietly." Then Sapt stepped out. Rischenheim had no words to meet the sudden transformation of the interview. He seemed to be able to do nothing but stare at Rudolf Rassendyll. Sapt wasted no time. He snatched the count's revolver and stowed it in his own pocket. "Now take the paper," said he to Rudolf, and his barrel held Rischenheim motionless, while Rudolf wrenched the precious document from his fingers. "Look if it's the right one. No, don't read it through. Just look. Is it right? That's good. Now put your revolver to his head again. I'm going to search him. Stand up, sir." They compelled the count to stand up, and Sapt subjected him to a search that made the concealment of another copy or of any other document impossible. Then they let him sit down again. His eyes seemed fascinated by Rudolf Rassendyll. "Yet you've seen me before, I think?" smiled Rudolf. "I seem to remember you as a boy in Strelsau when I was there. Now tell us, sir, where did you leave this cousin of yours?" For the plan was to find out from Rischenheim where Rupert was, and to set off in pursuit of Rupert as soon as they had disposed of Rischenheim. But even as Rudolf spoke, there was a violent knock at the door. Rudolf sprang to open it. Sapt and his revolver kept their places. Bernenstein was on the threshold, open mouthed. "The king's servant has just gone by. He's looking for Colonel Sapt. The king has been walking in the drive, and learnt from a sentry of Rischenheim's arrival. I told the man that you had taken the count for a stroll round the castle, and I did not know where you were. He says the king may come himself at any moment." Sapt considered for one short instant. Then he was back by the prisoner's side. "We must talk again later on," he said in low, quick tones. "Now you're going to breakfast with the king. I shall be there, and Bernenstein. Remember, not a word of your errand, not a word of this gentleman. At a word, a sign, a hint, a gesture, a motion, as God lives, I'll put a bullet through your head, and 1,000 kings shan't stop me. Rudolf, get behind the curtain. If there's an alarm, you must jump through the window into the moat and swim for it." "All right," said Rudolf Rassendyll. "I can read my letter there." "Burn it, you fool!" "When I've read it, I'll eat it, if you like, but not before." Bernenstein looked in again. "Quick, quick! The man will be back," he whispered. "Bernenstein, did you hear what I said to the count?" "Yes, I heard." "Then you know your part. Now, gentlemen, to the king." "Well?" said an angry voice outside. "I wondered how long I was to be kept waiting." Rudolf Rassendyll skipped behind the curtain. Sapt's revolver slipped into a handy pocket. Rischenheim stood with arms dangling by his side and his waistcoat half unbuttoned. Young Bernenstein was bowing low on the threshold and protesting that the king's servant had but just gone, and that they were on the point of waiting on his Majesty. Then the king walked in, pale and full bearded. "Ah, Count," said he, "I'm glad to see you. If they had told me you were here, you shouldn't have waited a minute. You're very dark in here, Sapt. Why don't you draw back the curtains?" And the king moved towards the curtain behind which Rudolf was. "Allow me, sire," cried Sapt, darting past him and laying a hand on the curtain. A malicious gleam of pleasure shot into Rischenheim's eyes. "In truth, sire," continued the constable, his hand on the curtain, "we were so interested in what the count was saying about his dogs." "By heaven, I forgot!" cried the king. "Yes, yes, the dogs. Now tell me, Count." "Your pardon, sire," put in young Bernenstein, "but breakfast waits." "Yes, yes, we'll have them together, breakfast and the dogs. Come along, Count." The king passed his arm through Rischenheim's, adding to Bernenstein, "Lead the way, Lieutenant, and you, Colonel, come with us." They went out. Sapt stopped and locked the door behind him. "Why do you lock the door, Colonel?" asked the king. "There are some papers in my drawer there, sire." "But why not lock the drawer?" "I have lost the key, sire, like the fool I am," said the colonel. The Count of Luzau Rischenheim did not make a very good breakfast. He sat opposite to the king. Colonel Sapt placed himself at the back of the king's chair, and Rischenheim saw the muzzle of a revolver resting on top of the chair, just behind his Majesty's right ear. Bernenstein stood in soldierly rigidity by the door. Rischenheim looked round him once and met a most significant gaze. "You're eating nothing," said the king. "I hope you're not indisposed." "I am a little upset, sire," stammered Rischenheim, and truly enough. "Well, tell me about the dogs while I eat, for I am hungry." Rischenheim began to disclose his secret. His statement was decidedly wanting in clearness. The king grew impatient. "I don't understand," said he testily, and he pushed his chair back so quickly that Sapt skipped away and hid the revolver behind his back. "Sire," cried Rischenheim, half rising. A cough from Lieutenant von Bernenstein interrupted him. "Tell it me over again," said the king. Rischenheim did as he was bid. "Ah, I understand a little better now. Do you see, Sapt?" And he turned his head round towards the constable. Sapt had just time to whisk the revolver away. The count leant forward towards the king. Lieutenant von Bernenstein coughed. The count sank back again. "Perfectly, sire," said Colonel Sapt. I understood all the count wishes to convey to your Majesty." "Well, I understood